Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise and get straight to the crucial insights from the stories that truly matter. Today, we're taking an in-depth exploration into an ongoing federal case that has, well, certainly captivated a lot of attention: the United States versus Sean Diddy Combs. Our analysis for this particular dive is based on excerpts from a recent YouTube transcript, specifically covering trial days 27 and 28. It's been a truly pivotal couple of days in court. Things really seem to be coming to a head.
Absolutely. And our mission, as always, is to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight from these complex legal proceedings. We'll be focusing on the arguments presented by both the prosecution and the defense as they move towards resting their respective cases, really trying to give you the clearest picture possible of where things stand right now.
Okay, but before we jump into the details, a necessary disclaimer. The topic we're discussing involves extremely sensitive material. All individuals mentioned are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. This deep dive contains highly sensitive content, including allegations involving SA, illegal substances, and adult themes. So, viewer discretion is strongly advised. Rest assured, our discussion will remain strictly impartial, reporting solely on the content within the provided source material.
Right, so let's get into it. The atmosphere in the courtroom on day 27 was, according to our source, charged with what could only be described as bombshell revelations. It sounds like it significantly shifted the tenor of the proceedings. The jury was shown 13 sealed sexually explicit videos featuring Jane, Diddy, and multiple men.
That's right. And it was revealed there are around 50 such videos in total, many allegedly filmed while Jane was, under Diddy's control, according to the prosecution. Wow. And the court also reviewed some, well, disturbing messages. Jane expressed to Diddy that she didn't want to be used or forced into Hotel SCX acts to keep a roof over her head. That's a direct quote, apparently.
Yeah, and Diddy's alleged response was just, "Girl, stop." And questions like whether it would be a movie or an entertainment night.
So how do you see the prosecution leveraging that stark contrast between her alleged statements and, well, the visual evidence and his response?
Well, that's where the nuance of intent becomes absolutely critical, isn't it? The prosecution is clearly trying to build a pattern of systematic control and exploitation using these messages and videos. They're aiming to show a lack of genuine consent, basically.
Right.
But the defense, they're likely framing it as a consensual, maybe unusual dynamic, or perhaps even a transactional relationship that Jane willingly participated in. They'll isolate moments to argue she had agency.
Okay.
This contrast, it isn't just about conflicting stories. It highlights the core legal battle. How do you prove intent with fragmented digital evidence like this?
Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking of conflicting narratives, the court also dug into messages with escort agencies, like Cowboys for Angels, apparently, raising even more questions about Diddy's alleged control.
Exactly. Evidence showed Diddy paid for performers even when they couldn't perform. Thousands of dollars moving around, hotels booked, assistants coordinating logistics.
And those voice notes, Diddy asking for baby oil soup and wads of cash.
And Jane's allegations continued in other messages. She apparently told Diddy, "It's been 3 years of me having to F strangers."
Goodness. And there were further messages, booking details, what were described as sexual demands, all presented.
But then, during cross-examination, Diddy's attorneys pushed back hard.
How so?
They pointed to government summaries showing Jane texting one of the escorts, calling him cutie, saying she was horny, wanting to fly him out herself. So their narrative is, look, this wasn't trafficking. This is something Jane actually wanted to do within her relationship with Diddy.
That definitely raises a crucial question for the jury, doesn't it? Which version to believe?
It absolutely does. The jury is tasked with weighing these very conflicting narratives. Is it a systematic pattern of alleged coercion? Or are there moments suggesting independent agency on her part?
And Homeland Security added another layer.
Yes. They confirmed most incidents happened before Diddy started paying Jane's rent in 2023. And that, other meetings might not have been documented.
That timeline could be significant.
For both sides, really. The defense might argue the relationship evolved or her motivations changed, while the prosecution will likely focus on the alleged power imbalance throughout the whole period.
Okay, let's shift gears then to trial day 28. This is where the defense really seemed to make a push, trying to introduce new evidence, specifically about Cassie Ventura, right? Trying to dismantle the prosecution's case regarding her.
Exactly. They tried to admit text messages showing Cassie initiating and setting up a hotel room for these freak-offs with Combs. The goal was clear, to argue he didn't coerce Ventura.
But the prosecution objected.
They did, arguing relevance mainly. And the judge sustained some objections, meaning the jury didn't hear everything.
But some things got through.
Yes. Messages were discussed, like Cassie's reply, "Be your little freak," when Combs asked what she was going to do, or Cassie asking Combs for an explicit photo.
So the defense is using her own words against the coercion narrative.
Precisely. They want to show her agency, even initiation. And the judge's rulings on what's in and what's out are critical. They shape what the jury can actually consider.
Right. Relevance grounds meaning the judge didn't think it directly related to the legal questions, or maybe it was too prejudicial.
Exactly that. It's about whether the information helps answer the legal question fairly.
And to further argue against coercion, the defense brought up texts where Cassie apparently wrote, she bought baby oil because she couldn't stop herself.
Implying it was for a freak-off. Though the prosecution countered that they don't dispute she wanted to have intercourse with her boyfriend. The defense also claimed Combs canceled one freak-off because Cassie was sick. Again, trying to show he wasn't forcing people.
But the prosecution disputed that cancellation.
Immediately. They said there was no evidence the freak-off was canceled. So, a direct factual dispute there.
And what about the financial motive angle? Cassie saying, I want my bank account to be right.
The defense definitely tried to bring that up, suggesting a financial motive for her claims later on.
But the judge shut that down.
Sustained an objection based on hearsay and relevance grounds.
So hearsay, meaning it's secondhand info, generally not allowed.
In simple terms, yes. Unless it fits a specific exception. It's all this legal maneuvering trying to control the narrative through these texts. Each side picks specific messages to introduce or exclude, trying to prove coercion or consent, or maybe other motives. And the judge is the gatekeeper for what the jury gets to hear and legally consider. Context is everything.
Absolutely. So, after all that back and forth on evidence, we've now reached a really pivotal point. The defense has rested its case, and crucially, they filed a Rule 29 motion. Which isn't just, procedural housekeeping, right? It's a big statement.
That's exactly right. It's the defense formally asking the judge to dismiss the case right then and there, arguing the prosecution hasn't presented enough evidence for any reasonable jury to convict.
But you mentioned these motions rarely succeed.
They rarely do, especially in complex federal cases. It's often more about preserving arguments for a potential appeal, and maybe sending a message to the jury, subtly, about perceived weaknesses in the prosecution's case, like saying, see, even legally, this is thin.
And their arguments were pretty sweeping. Against the RCO charges, that seems central.
Definitely. RCO, because of the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, it's a heavy charge. The defense argued the requirements just weren't met. No real agreement, no proven enterprise. They called it a rimless hub-like, individuals acting, but no organized criminal center coordinating everything.
And insufficient proof of a 20-year conspiracy. Only thin proof of crime.
Yeah, and that any illegal substances were just personal quantities, not part of some distribution scheme.
And challenging the coercion claims, especially regarding Cassie.
They conceded the relationship was toxic and regrettably violent at times. That's a direct quote from their argument.
Wow.
But they drew a sharp line. Domestic violence is not SA trafficking. They argued Cassie enjoyed the sexual activity, did not feel coerced, and that she left when violence occurred.
They also pointed out a gap between Cassie's breakup in 2018 and Jane's alleged involvement starting in 2021.
Yes, arguing there was no evidence of a continuous Riker conspiracy spanning that time.
So the defense is really trying to pick apart the prosecution's framework, charge by charge.
Exactly. Attacking the legal definitions, the interpretation of the evidence, drawing clear lines. This might be bad or unhealthy, but it doesn't meet the legal standard for SA trafficking or racketeering. That's their core message.
They also addressed the staff's knowledge, specifically Christina Korm, the former chief of staff.
Right. They claim there's no evidence she knew or believed girlfriends were coerced, or that she facilitated any crimes, except maybe getting personal use substances.
And they argued Combs actively hid things from staff.
Yes, by having Combs, Cassie, and Jane book entertainers directly, sort of keeping employees out of the loop on that specific activity.
And witness tampering, the Mia and Drock situation.
They painted Drock's conversation with Mia as normal, no threats. They even noted Mia herself brought up money first, so not witness tampering was their conclusion.
It really is a comprehensive strategy, hitting every major point.
Absolutely. For each charge, they offer an alternative explanation or argue there's a lack of the necessary legal connection. trying to create reasonable doubt by showing these actions, in their view, just don't fit the crimes charge. They want the jury to see individual choices, not some grand conspiracy.
And what about forced labor? That seemed like a specific point of contention.
It did. The defense argued that the statute, which they claim is meant more for domestic workers, was misapplied here. They described the individuals involved as able-bodied U.S. citizens perfectly capable of leaving.
And they address specific examples, like Capricorn clerk not getting overtime.
Right, arguing that's a wage issue, maybe, but not forced labor under the statute.
Hmm.
They also brought up Mia having a high GPA and getting a job with Madonna later, implying she wasn't some helpless victim of forced labor.
And quickly, other allegations. Kidnapping, arson, fraud.
They countered those too, argued kidnapping didn't meet New York or California law requirements, denied Diddy's involvement in arson. And they really attacked the fraud theory applied to romantic partners, called it vague, said people do this all the time in relationships, basically implying it was being stretched too far.
So the theme is consistent.
Yeah.
Maybe bad behavior, but not these specific federal crimes.
That's the thread running through their entire Rule 29 argument. It's about discrediting the legal classification of the alleged acts.
Okay, moving to the courtroom dynamics then. A very significant moment was Sean Combs himself deciding not to testify.
Yes, a major decision for any defendant.
The judge confirmed he understood his right and explicitly told the jury no one can draw any inference from it.
Which is standard procedure, but crucial.
And Combs thanked the judge, said, "You're doing an excellent job."
He did. A brief, perhaps strategic, moment of courtesy in a very tense environment.
What are the implications generally when a defendant chooses not to testify?
Well, the main one is avoiding cross-examination. The prosecution doesn't get a chance to question him directly, which could be risky for the defense. It prevents him from potentially misspeaking or providing testimony that harms his own case. But the jury doesn't get to hear his side directly from him. The judge's instruction not to hold it against him is key for fairness.
Got it. So after that, the defense presented its actual case, which was described as brief.
Very brief, yes. It mostly involved entering stipulations, basically, agreed upon facts about devices Cassie Ventura provided to the government.
And they highlighted specific messages from Cassie again.
They did. For example, Combs asking if she could freak off without getting high.
Yeah.
And her replying, yes, smiley face. Another message where Cassie asked Combs to send me a D-pic.
Again, reinforcing their argument about her active participation.
Exactly. Trying to show she was a willing, even initiating participant in the sexual aspects of their relationship, countering the coercion narrative piece by piece.
And finally, they presented witness stipulations. What were those about?
These were agreements on facts, stating that several key witnesses, Daniel Phillips, Don Richard, Mia, Brianna Bongolan, did not initially report threats or SA by Combs to law enforcement during their very first meetings.
Ah, that seems significant, aiming to cast doubt on their stories.
Precisely. It's a strategy to undermine the credibility and consistency of the accusations, suggesting maybe the stories changed over time or weren't immediately reported, trying to sow doubt in the jury's mind about the reliability of the testimony they heard.
And you mentioned technical issues. Jury devices off, public screens off.
Yeah, just a side note from the source, but those kinds of glitches can certainly complicate things for everyone trying to follow complex evidence presentations.
Okay, so just to confirm where we are now, both sides have rested, prosecution and defense.
That's correct. Case is rested.
And the prosecution isn't planning a rebuttal case.
No, they indicated they don't intend to present one, which means the evidence phase is officially over.
So we move directly to closing arguments, scheduled for Thursday.
Yes. Each side get 4 hours, their final chance to tie everything together and persuade the jury.
And the verdict sheet is ready. The jury will decide guilt or innocence on racketeering, SA trafficking, forced labor, illegal substance crimes involving Cassie or Jane.
It's all coming down to this. The jury has heard weeks of testimony, seen complex evidence. Now they have to weigh it all against the legal standards explained by the judge. It's an enormous responsibility.
This analysis into the trial has really underscored the complex web of evidence, the sophisticated arguments from both sides. It's a stark reminder of how intricate these legal proceedings are, especially with such sensitive and, frankly, high-profile allegations.
Absolutely. And, this deep dive into the Combs trial, especially looking at these contrasting interpretations of consent, agency, digital messages, it really powerfully illustrates a broader challenge. How does the legal system grapple with defining boundaries in relationships, especially those marked by, extreme power imbalances? amplified by fame. The jury's verdict here, whatever it is, might subtly influence how coercion is viewed, particularly in this digital age.
Yeah.
It forces us all, I think, to consider how we truly understand free will within very complex, often very private human interactions.